At End House, where waves hide secrets, Hercule Poirot battles a deadly game. A cut rope nearly kills him. A spider bites in a glass jungle. A beam falls in a dark attic. A sail breaks in a wild cove. Poison strikes at a masked ball. A secret vault holds treasure or death. Who's the killer? Bold Freddy? Witty Vivian? Shadowy Mrs. Lestrange? Moody Nick? Or shaky Dr. Graham? As tides rise, Poirot races to find the truth. Will he solve it or die trying?
Chapter 1. Whispers on the Waves. The sun dipped low over the Cornish coast, casting a golden sheen across the restless sea, its waves whispering secrets to the jagged cliffs of St. Lou. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit and polished Homburg, stepped off the wheezing steam train onto the weathered platform, his patent leather shoes clicking with precision. The air was sharp with salt and the faint sweetness of gorse, a stark contrast to the coal-dust haze of London. His mustache, meticulously groomed, twitched as a gust tugged at his hat. "Mon Dieu!" he murmured, his Belgian accent crisp as a freshly pressed linen. The seaside promises repose, yet the little grey cells, they sense a restlessness in the air. Poirot had been lured to this remote corner of England by a letter from his old friend Captain Hastings, who had painted End House as a haven of charm and mystery. But Hastings, ever prone to last-minute entanglements, had been summoned to London on urgent business, leaving Poirot to face his holiday alone. A battered motor-car idled nearby, its driver, a grizzled Cornishman named Jago Penwith, leaning against the hood. His face, weathered as the cliffs, cracked into a grin. "Mr. Poirot, is it? Off to End House, then. Miss Buckley's got a right spectacle planned. Calls it a survival game. Folks from all over, high and low, flockin' to her doorstep." Poirot's green eyes glinted with curiosity. "A game of survival? Précisez, s'il vous plaît. What is its nature?" Jago shrugged, tossing Poirot's valise into the boot. "Some fancy to-do for the gentry. Riddles, hunts, bit of theatrics. Sounds like madness to me, but Miss Medulla's got a way o' making madness merry." He climbed into the driver's seat, and the car lurched forward, rattling along the winding road toward the sea. The drive was a tapestry of rugged beauty, cliffs plunging into frothing waves, gulls wheeling overhead, and the distant toll of a buoy like a heartbeat of the coast. Poirot, however, was less captivated by the scenery than by Jago's words. A game. His mind, ever a labyrinth of logic, began to weave possibilities. Games, he knew, could mask darker intents. As the car crested a hill, End House came into view. A sprawling, weather-beaten manor perched precariously above the cove, its turrets sagging like an old dowager's shoulders. Ivy clung to its walls, and the windows gleamed with the last light of day, as if guarding secrets within. Jago dropped him at the gravel drive, where a young woman in a flowing summer dress awaited. Magdala Buckley, the heiress of End House, was a vision of vitality, her auburn hair catching the sunset like embers. "Monsieur Poirot," she called, her voice bright as a lark's song. "Welcome to my humble chaos. I'm so sorry about Hastings. Beastly timing. But you're just in time for the fun." Poirot bowed, his hat tipping with courtly precision. "Mademoiselle, your invitation is most gracious. This survival game, it intrigues me. What precisely does it entail?" Magdala laughed, leading him toward the house. "Oh, it's a lark. A week of challenges, scavenger hunts, puzzles, a bit of play-acting. My friends are here, and we're all dreadfully competitive. Tonight's the first trial, a treasure hunt along the cliffs. Nothing too strenuous, just enough to get the blood pumping. You'll join us, won't you?" Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes were already scanning the scene. The lawn buzzed with guests, 6 in all, a motley crew of Magdala's inner circle. There was Freddie Langdon, a rakish young man with a yachtsman's tan and a grin that promised mischief. Vivian Clare, a stage actress whose sharp wit matched her crimson lipstick. Dr. Elias Graham, an elderly physician with a tremor in his hands and a knowing glint in his eye. Mrs. Lestrange, a widow draped in black silk, her face half hidden by a veiled hat. Nick Buckley, Magdala's younger brother, a brooding artist with paint-stained fingers, and Clara Trelawney, a local historian with a penchant for folklore and a nervous laugh. The group gathered in the drawing-room, a cavernous space of faded grandeur. Velvet drapes sagged, and a chandelier flickered, casting shadows that danced like specters. Magdala clapped her hands, her emerald bracelet flashing. "Right, everyone, the survival game begins tonight. We're hunting for the Star of St. Lou, a gem my great-uncle swore was hidden on these cliffs. I've scattered clues, riddles, tokens, a bit of old-fashioned adventure. Find the final marker by midnight, and you'll win the first round's prize, a key to the next challenge." Vivian raised a manicured eyebrow. "And what's the prize, darling? Not another of your uncle's dusty relics?" Magdala's eyes sparkled. "Oh, it's better than that, but you'll have to play to find out." Poirot, seated in a wing-back chair, sipped a glass of black-currant cordial, his mind cataloguing every gesture, every glance. Freddie was too eager, his charm a polished mask. Vivian's sarcasm carried an edge, as if she were testing the room. Dr. Graham's silence was heavy, his fingers clutching a silver cigarette case. Mrs. Lestrange's veil twitched, betraying a nervous tic. Nick sketched in a corner, his pencil scratching like a warning, and Clara muttered about cursed cliffs under her breath. The game, Poirot sensed, was more than it seemed. As dusk deepened, the group spilled onto the cliff path, armed with lanterns and Magdala's hand-drawn maps. The trail was narrow, snaking along the precipice, where the sea roared below, its foam glowing ghostly in the twilight. Poirot, ever cautious, lagged behind, his eyes darting between the players and the treacherous terrain. The first clue, etched on a slate hidden beneath a gorse bush, read, "Where the mermaid weeps, the starlight sleeps." Clara, her historian's mind alight, pointed to a rock formation called the Mermaid's Tear, a jagged outcrop where waves crashed like sobs. The group scrambled toward it, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies. Freddie, ever the showman, scaled the rock first, crowing as he unearthed a brass compass inscribed with a second riddle.
"Follow the shadow when the moon is high." The moon, just rising, cast long shadows across the cliff, and Poirot noted how Nick lingered at the rear, his gaze fixed not on the path, but on his sister's back. Suspicion, like a pebble in Poirot's shoe, began to niggle. The hunt led them to a crumbling stone arch, where a third clue, a velvet pouch containing a pearl, hung from a rusted nail. Vivian snatched it, her laugh sharp as glass. "This game's too easy, Magdala. You'll have to try harder to stump me." Magdala's smile faltered, but before she could retort, a gust howled through the arch, and a lantern, suspended above the path, swung wildly. Poirot, standing directly beneath, caught the glint of frayed rope, a heartbeat before it snapped. With a cry of "Attention!" he dove aside, his hat tumbling into the gorse as the heavy lantern crashed where he'd stood, shattering into splinters of glass and iron. Gasps erupted. Freddie hauled Poirot to his feet, his face pale. "Good Lord, man! Are you all right?" Poirot dusted his coat, his voice calm but laced with steel. "I am unharmed, merci. But the rope, it was not worn by nature, no? It was cut." The group froze, lanterns casting their faces in stark relief. Magdala's hand flew to her mouth. "Cut? But who would—" Perhaps an accident, Dr. Graham offered, his voice unsteady. These cliffs are old, the fixtures older. Mrs. Lestrange's veil shifted, her voice low. Or perhaps someone doesn't care for strangers playing their game. Nick, silent until now, tossed his sketchbook aside. Don't be absurd. It's just Magdalé's theatrics gone wrong. Let's finish this blasted hunt. Poirot retrieved his hat, his fingers brushing the severed rope. The cut was clean, deliberate, made with a blade. His mind whirled, cataloguing motives. Was this aimed at him, the outsider, or was it a warning to another? He said nothing, but his eyes missed nothing as the group pressed on, their laughter now brittle, their glances sharp. The final clue lay in a tide pool, a silver locket engraved with a star. Freddy, ever bold, waded in, retrieving it with a triumphant shout. "The Star of St. Lo! I've won, Magdala!" Magdala clapped, but her eyes flickered to the shadows. "Well done, Freddy. The key inside unlocks tomorrow's challenge. Now let's get back before the tide traps us." As they trudged back to End House, the sea's roar seemed to mock their unease. Poirot lagged again, his lantern low, examining the path. A glint caught his eye, a shard of glass, not from the lantern, but etched with a faint initial, N. He pocketed it, his mind a chessboard where pawns were already moving. Back in the drawing room, the fire crackled as Magdala poured champagne. The mood was festive, but the air was thick with unspoken questions. Poirot declined the glass, his gaze sweeping the room. Freddy flirted with Vivian, who parried with barbed wit. Dr. Graham clutched his cigarette case, his hand steadier now. Mrs. Lestrange's veil shifted, her voice low. Clara muttered about ancient feuds tied to the Buckley estate. And Nick was missing. Poirot excused himself, slipping into the hall. A faint sound drew him to a locked door near the staircase, a muffled argument, two voices, one sharp, one pleading. He pressed his ear closer, catching fragments of "too far," "you promised," and "no one was supposed to." The voices cut off, and footsteps retreated. He tried the knob, but it held fast. Returning to the drawing room, he found Nick rejoining the group, his face flushed, his sketchbook clutched like a shield. Magdala raised a toast, to survival and to secrets unveiled. Poirot raised his cordial, his smile enigmatic, to secrets, mademoiselle, and to their unraveling. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot lingered by the fire, the glass shard and cut rope heavy in his pocket. The survival game, he mused, was no mere diversion. Someone played for higher stakes, perhaps for life itself. The sea whispered beyond the windows, and Hercule Poirot, his little grey cells alight, vowed to uncover the truth before the tide turned deadly.
Chapter 2. Shadows in the Conservatory. The dawn broke over St. Lou with a hesitant light, as if the sun itself were wary of the secrets nestled within End House. Hercule Poirot, already impeccably dressed despite the early hour, stood at his window, gazing at the cliffs where the previous night's near-fatal lantern incident had left an uneasy ripple among the guests. His mustache, a perfect crescent, quivered as he considered the glass shard etched with an N now tucked safely in his waistcoat pocket. The survival game, Magdala Buckley's grand diversion, was proving to be anything but a game. "The little grey cells," he murmured, tapping his temple. "They sense a pattern beneath the chaos, but what, precisely, is its shape?" Breakfast was served in End House's dining room, a cavernous space where portraits of stern Buckley ancestors glared from peeling walls. The air smelled of toast and suspicion, the clink of cutlery punctuated by strained pleasantries. Magdala, radiant in a cream blouse, presided over the table like a ringmaster, her auburn hair catching the morning light. "Good morning, everyone," she chirped, ignoring the undercurrent of tension. "I trust you all slept well after our cliffside adventure. Today's challenge is indoors. No pesky ropes to worry about, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot, sipping his café au lait, inclined his head.
One hopes, mademoiselle, that today's trial is less precipitous. The group chuckled, but the sound was hollow. Freddie Langdon, his yachtsman's tan glowing, leaned back with a grin. "Come on now, Magdala, what's on the menu? More riddles, or are we wrestling sharks this time?" Vivian Clare, her crimson lipstick a slash of defiance, smirked. "As long as it's not another of your uncle's moldy heirlooms, I'll play along." Dr. Elias Graham, his hands less tremulous today, cleared his throat. "Let's hope it's civilized. My old bones aren't made for acrobatics." Mrs. Lestrange, her black veil casting delicate shadows, said nothing, her gloved fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. Clara Trelawney, the historian, fidgeted with her napkin, muttering about ill omens in the house's history. Nick Buckley, Magdala's brother, slouched in his chair, his paint-stained fingers drumming an impatient rhythm. Poirot noted every gesture, every glance, his mind a ledger of motives and alibis. Magdala clapped her hands, her emerald bracelet glinting. "Today's challenge is a locked-room puzzle in the conservatory. I've hidden clues among the plants. Find them, solve the riddle, and you'll uncover a piece of Endhouse's forgotten fortune. But beware, the conservatory is a jungle, and not everything in it is friendly." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Friendly, mademoiselle? You speak of plants, or something more?" Her laugh was bright, but her eyes darted to Nick, who scowled. "Just plants, Monsieur Poirot, though some are rather exotic. Shall we?" The conservatory, a glass-domed relic at the rear of Endhouse, was a riot of greenery. Vines spilled over iron trellises, orchids bloomed in feverish hues, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and jasmine. Sunlight filtered through cracked panes, casting dappled shadows that seemed to shift with intent. Magdala handed each guest a leather-bound notebook containing a single clue. "In the heart of the jungle, where thorns guard the rose, seek the cipher that only the patient disclose." The group dispersed, their footsteps muffled by mossy tiles. Poirot, ever methodical, lingered near a cluster of bromeliads, his eyes scanning for anomalies. Freddie, with his usual bravado, plunged into a thicket of ferns, crowing as he unearthed a brass key etched with numbers 739. "Got it," he called, holding it aloft. "This must unlock something." Vivian, her silk scarf snagging on a cactus, snorted. "Don't crow too soon, darling. It's probably a decoy." Clara, peering into a pot of lilies, recited local lore under her breath. "The Buckleys built this place on smuggler's gold. Thorns and roses could be a metaphor for their greed." Her words trailed off as she brushed against a spiky aloe, wincing as it drew blood. Dr. Graham, moving slowly, examined a trellis of climbing roses, his cigarette case now tucked away. Mrs. Lestrange hovered near a bank of orchids, her veil fluttering as she bent to inspect a leaf. Nick, meanwhile, sketched furiously in his notebook, his pencil scratching like a trapped insect. Poirot, unnoticed, watched them all, his mind tracing invisible threads.
The second clue emerged from a hollowed-out bamboo stalk, a parchment with a cipher. Shift the numbers, align the stars, the rose's thorn reveals what's ours. Freddie, quick with figures, decoded the key's numbers as a Caesar cipher, shifting each by 3 to reveal 406. "A combination!" he exclaimed, pointing to a rusted safe half hidden behind a curtain of ivy. As the group converged, Vivian pushed forward, her heels clicking. "Let me try it." She spun the dial, 406, and the safe creaked open, revealing a velvet box. Inside was a single ruby, glowing like a drop of blood. "Well," she purred, "this is more like it." But her triumph was short-lived. As she lifted the ruby, a faint rustle came from the foliage above, a soft, deliberate sound, like silk brushing stone.
Before anyone could react, a spider, its body a glossy black with crimson streaks, dropped onto Vivian's hand. She screamed, flinging the ruby as the creature sank its fangs into her skin. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, her face paling to ash. Chaos erupted. Freddie caught her, shouting for help. Dr. Graham, with surprising agility, knelt beside her, his medical bag already open. It's a latrodectus, a red-backed widow. Venomous, but not fatal if treated quickly. He rummaged for a vial of antivenom, his hands steady now, and administered it with a syringe. Vivian gasped, her breathing shallow but stabilizing. Poirot, unmoved by the panic, knelt beside the fallen ruby, his gloved fingers probing the surrounding soil. There, half buried, was a torn scrap of fabric, silk, dyed indigo with a faint floral scent. He pocketed it, his eyes darting to Mrs. Lestrange, whose gloved hand twitched. Curieux. A spider so exotic, so conveniently placed. This is no accident, no? Magdala's face, white, stammered. I didn't know. The conservatory's been neglected, but I never— Neglect does not place a latrodectus in a velvet box, Poirot said sharply. This has orchestrated this performance. Nick, his sketchbook forgotten, snapped, "You're saying someone tried to kill her? That's madness!" "Is it?" Mrs. Lestrange's voice, low and measured, cut through the din. "This house has seen worse than madness." Clara, clutching her bleeding finger, whispered, "The Buckley's curse. Smuggler's gold always demands blood." Dr. Graham, wiping sweat from his brow, stood. "She'll live, but she needs rest. Let's get her to the house." As Freddie and Nick carried Vivian inside, Poirot lingered, his lantern illuminating the conservatory's shadows. He traced the path of the spider's descent, noting a faint smear of wax on a vine, a residue suggesting the creature had been guided, perhaps by a makeshift funnel. His mind whirred, connecting the silk scrap to the glass shard from the cliff. Were they linked? And why Vivian? Her sharp tongue had made enemies, but this felt personal, precise. Back in the drawing room, Vivian rested on a chaise longue, her color returning. Magdala, wringing her hands, offered brandy to the shaken guests. "I swear, this wasn't meant to happen. The game was supposed to be fun." "Fun? First, a lantern nearly brains Poirot. Now this. Someone's playing dirty. Or someone's playing to win." Mrs. Lestrange, her veil still in place, sipped her brandy. Poirot, standing by the fireplace, twirled his mustache. "The ruby, mademoiselle," he said to Magdala. "It was the prize, oui? But what is its significance?" Magdala hesitated, then sighed. "It's part of the estate's legend, a smuggler's hoard, hidden by my great-uncle. The game was meant to uncover it, piece by piece." Clara's eyes widened. "The hoard's real. I thought it was just stories, pirates, betrayals, blood on the cliffs." "Stories have teeth," Poirot said softly, "and this one, I think, has bitten." As the group dispersed, Poirot slipped into the hall, drawn by a faint creak from the conservatory door. He peered through the glass, seeing a shadow, slight, fleeting, vanish into the foliage. He did not pursue. Instead, he returned to his room, locking the door. The silk scrap and wax smear joined the glass shard in his pocket, each a piece of a puzzle he was determined to solve. Outside, a storm gathered, its first drops pattering against the conservatory's panes. Poirot sat at a small desk, sketching a map of the day's events in his mind. The survival game was a facade, he was sure, masking a deeper intent. Was Vivian the target, or a warning to another? And the shadow in the conservatory, whose hand had guided the spider's fall? As thunder rumbled, Hercule Poirot's little grey cells burned bright, piecing together the shadows of End House, where every bloom hid a thorn and every player a secret.
Chapter 3. Echoes from the Attic. The morning after the conservatory's venomous betrayal, Endhouse stood cloaked in a mist that clung to its weathered stones like a shroud. Hercule Poirot, his suit pristine despite the damp, stood at the foot of the grand staircase, his green eyes tracing the spiral of oak banisters upward. The spider's bite on Vivian Clare, the cut rope on the cliff, and the glass shard etched with an N. Each was a note in a discordant symphony, and Poirot's little gray cells hummed to find its melody. "The game," he murmured, his Belgian accent sharp as a blade. "It grows more dangerous, yet its purpose remains veiled. Today I shall peel back another layer." Breakfast was a subdued affair, the dining room's ancestral portraits seeming to leer at the diminished company. Vivian, pale but defiant, sat with a shawl draped over her shoulders, her crimson lipstick a stark contrast to her ashen face. Magdala Buckley, her auburn curls slightly askew, tried to rally the group with forced cheer. "We're not letting last night spoil the fun," she declared, her voice brittle. "Today's challenge is in the attic, a treasure hunt among my family's relics. It's perfectly safe, I promise." Freddie Langdon, his yachtsman's charm dimmed by fatigue, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Safe? After lanterns and spiders? You'll forgive me if I bring a stick to poke things first." Dr. Elias Graham, his hands steady now, sipped his tea. "Let's hope it's just dust we're battling today. My heart's not fond of surprises." Mrs. Lestrange, her black veil a constant shadow, murmured, "Surprises are the least of this house's sins." Her words hung like the mist outside. Clara Trelawney, the historian, clutched a worn notebook, her eyes darting nervously. The attics where the Buckleys hid their secrets. Smugglers' ledgers, cursed trinkets. I've read the stories. Nick Buckley, Magdala's brother, slouched in his chair, his paint-stained fingers tracing invisible sketches on the tablecloth. "Stories," he scoffed. "This place is just old, not haunted. Let's get this over with." Poirot, sipping his café au lait, observed them all, his mind a chessboard where each player was a piece with hidden moves. The silk scrap from the conservatory, scented with jasmine, joined the glass shard in his mental inventory. Nick's absence during the cliffside argument and his flush return last night gnawed at him. Was the artist merely temperamental or something more? Magdala led the group up the creaking staircase to the attic, a vast shadowed space beneath the manor's eaves. Cobwebs draped like lace, and trunks of blackened oak stood sentinel among broken furniture and faded tapestries. The air was thick with dust and the faint tang of mildew, and the single skylight cast a pale beam that seemed to flinch from the corners. "Your task," Magdala announced, her emerald bracelet catching the light, "is to find the locket of St. Lou, a family heirloom said to unlock the estate's deepest secret. I've hidden clues among the relics, riddles, tokens, a bit of history. First to the locket wins today's prize." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And this prize, mademoiselle? Perhaps another ruby?" Her smile was tight. "Something better. A key to the next challenge and a step closer to the smuggler's hoard." The group scattered, their lanterns flickering like fireflies in the gloom. Poirot, ever cautious, lingered near a stack of crates, his gloved fingers probing for clues. Freddie, with his usual gusto, pried open a trunk revealing a bundle of yellowed letters tied with twine. "Love notes from some Buckley rogue, I bet," he called, scanning one. "Listen to this. 'My heart is yours, but the tide hides our truth.' Sounds like a clue." Vivian, her movements slow but determined, sifted through a pile of moth-eaten gowns. "If it's love letters, they're probably a distraction. Magdala's too clever for that." Her voice carried a bitter edge, as if the spider's bite had soured her trust. Clara, kneeling by a cracked mirror, muttered about the Buckley curse, blood for gold always. She unearthed a brass key, its head shaped like a crescent moon. "This fits the riddle," she exclaimed, reading from a scrap of paper tucked beneath it. "Where moonlight falls, the locket calls." Dr. Graham, poking through a box of medical instruments, paused, his face pale. "These are old, surgical tools from the smuggling days, used for more than healing, I'd wager." His fingers trembled slightly, betraying his unease. Mrs. Lestrange, her veil brushing a dusty candelabra, moved with eerie grace, her hands gliding over a locked chest. Nick, meanwhile, sketched in a corner, his pencil scratching furiously, as if capturing the attic's shadows. Poirot, unnoticed, watched him closely, noting the artist's eyes darting towards a shadowed alcove. The second clue emerged from a hollowed-out book, a volume of Cornish myths, containing a cipher, 3 steps north where the eagle's eye glints. Clara, her historian's mind sharp, pointed to a carved eagle on a beam, its glass eye glinting in the skylight's beam. Freddie scrambled up, retrieving a silver ring engraved with a star. "Another piece," he crowed, tossing it to Magdala.
But the attic, like House itself, was not content with mere games. As the group converged on a massive armoire, its doors carved with nautical motifs, a low groan echoed overhead. Poirot's head snapped up, his instincts flaring. "Attention!" he shouted, just as a beam, loosened from its moorings, crashed down in a cascade of splinters and dust. Dr. Graham, closest to the armoire, was pinned beneath a pile of relics, his cry muffled by the debris. Freddie and Nick rushed to free him, heaving aside broken chairs and a shattered globe. "Hold on, old man," Freddie grunted, his hands bleeding from splinters. Dr. Graham, gasping, was pulled free, his coat torn, but his body intact. "The curse," he wheezed, clutching Poirot's arm. "It's real. The house wants blood." "Nonsense," Nick snapped, but his eyes were wild, his sketchbook abandoned in the chaos. Poirot, kneeling beside the wreckage, examined the beam. Its bolts were not rusted, but sheared, as if tampered with. "This was no accident," he said softly, his voice cutting through the dust-choked air. Magdala, her face ashen, stammered, "I checked the attic myself. It was safe, I swear." "Safe?" Vivian hissed, her hand bandaged from the spider's bite. "This game of yours is a death trap." Mrs. Lestrange there fluttered, "Or a stage for someone's vengeance." Clara, clutching the crescent key, whispered, "The smuggler's hoard. It's cursed. The stories say anyone who seeks it pays a price." Poirot pocketed a shard of the sheared bolt, its edge gleaming with fresh cuts. "The price, mademoiselle, is paid by those who play with hidden hands. But whose hand, I wonder?" The final clue lay in the armoire, its lock yielding to Clara's key. Inside was the locket of St. Loup, a silver oval etched with a ship under sail. Freddie, ever bold, snatched it, but Poirot's hand shot out, seizing his wrist. "Permit me," he said, lifting the locket to the light. Tucked inside was a scrap of parchment, scorched at the edges, bearing a single word: betrayal. The group fell silent, the word hanging like a guillotine. Magdala's eyes widened. "It's just part of the game," she said, but her voice trembled. "A story, nothing more." Poirot's smile was thin. "Stories, mademoiselle, are written by someone, and this one, I think, has a living author." As they descended to the drawing-room, the storm outside broke, rain lashing the windows like a warning. Dr. Graham, supported by Freddie, sank into a chair, his face grey. Vivian, her strength returning, glared at Magdala. "This stops now, or I'm leaving." Nick, retrieving his sketchbook, muttered, "Good riddance." His words drew a sharp look from Mrs. Lestrange, whose gloved hand tightened on her reticule.
Poirot, standing by the fire, turned the scorched parchment over in his fingers. Its edges bore the faint scent of lamp oil, a clue, perhaps, to its origin. He recalled the muffled argument from the locked room the previous night, the voices sharp with accusation. Was the attic's collapse another act in the same drama? As the guests dispersed, Poirot slipped into the hall, drawn by a faint creak from the attic stairs. Peering up, he saw a shadow, swift, deliberate, vanish into the gloom. He did not follow. Instead, he returned to his room, locking the door. The bolt shard joined the glass shard in silk scrap in his pocket, each a piece of a puzzle growing ever more intricate. Outside, thunder rolled, shaking Endhouse to its bones. Poirot sat at his desk, his mind a map of motives. The survival game was a masquerade, he was certain, concealing a deeper intent. Was Dr. Graham's accident a warning or a misstep in a larger plan? And the scorched parchment, whose betrayal did it name? As lightning illuminated the cliffs, Hercule Poirot's little grey cells burned brighter, determined to unravel the echoes of Endhouse before they claimed another victim.
Chapter 4. Tides of Treachery. The mist that had cloaked Endhouse at dawn gave way to a restless afternoon, the Cornish sky bruised with clouds that promised a tempest. Hercule Poirot stood on the manor's weathered terrace, his Homburg hat tilted against the salt-laced wind, his green eyes scanning the cove below where waves gnashed at the rocks. The events of the survival game, the severed rope on the cliff, the venomous spider in the conservatory, the sabotaged beam in the attic, wove a tapestry of malice in his mind. The scorched parchment bearing the word betrayal, now tucked alongside a glass shard, a silk scrap and a sheared bolt in his waistcoat, whispered of a plot far darker than Magdala Buckley's playful charade. "The tide," Poirot murmured, his Belgian accent crisp as the snap of a sail. "It carries secrets to shore, but only for those who watch with care." Inside, the drawing-room buzzed with brittle tension as the guests gathered for the day's challenge. Magdala, her auburn hair pinned with a pearl clip, stood before the fireplace, her smile a fragile mask. "Tonight we sail. The survival game's next trial is a yacht race across the cove under moonlight. Find the hidden beacon, and you'll claim a key to the smuggler's hoard. It's thrilling, not dangerous. I've checked the boats myself." Vivian Clare, her hand still bandaged from the spider's bite, scoffed. "Thrilling? Your last thrilling game nearly killed me, darling." Freddie Langdon, his yachtsman's grin undimmed, clapped his hands. "A race? Now that's my kind of sport. I'll have you all eating my wake." Dr. Elias Graham, his face still pale from the attic's collapse, adjusted his spectacles. "I'll stay on shore, thank you. My heart's had enough excitement." Mrs. Lestrange, her black veil casting shadows like ink, spoke softly. "The sea is a cruel mistress. Be wary of what it hides." Clara Trelawney, clutching her notebook of local lore, shivered. "The cove's treacherous. Smugglers lost ships here for centuries. The tides don't forgive." Nick Buckley, his paint-stained fingers restless, rolled his eyes. "It's just a boat ride, not a ghost story. Let's move." Poirot, sipping a glass of elderflower cordial, observed the group with the precision of a watchmaker. Nick's impatience, Vivian's bitterness, Mrs. Lestrange's cryptic warnings, each was a thread in the web he sought to unravel. The muffled argument he'd overheard after the cliffside hunt, the jasmine-scented silk from the conservatory, the sheared bolt from the attic, all pointed to a hand orchestrating chaos. But whose? As dusk fell, the group descended to the cove, where 3 small yachts bobbed at a rickety pier, their sails glowing ghostly under the rising moon. Magdala assigned pairs, Freddie with Vivian, Nick with Clara, and Poirot with Mrs. Lestrange. "I'll monitor from shore," Magdala said, handing each team a lantern and a map marked with cryptic symbols. "The beacon is hidden on a buoy in the cove. First to retrieve it wins a key." Poirot, stepping aboard with Mrs. Lestrange, noted her steady gait despite the rocking deck.
"You are no stranger to the sea, madame," he remarked, his eyes catching the glint of a silver chain beneath her glove. Her veiled face turned toward him. "I have known storms, Monsieur Poirot. They teach you to watch for hidden currents." The race began with a shout, sails snapping as the yachts cut through the waves. The cove was a cauldron of churning water, its currents treacherous under the moonlight. Freddie's yacht surged ahead, his laughter echoing as Vivian clung to the rail, her scarf whipping like a flag. Nick and Clara struggled, their boat lurching as Clara fumbled with the map. Poirot, steering with surprising deftness, kept pace, his lantern casting a warm glow over Mrs. Lestrange's veiled silhouette. The first clue, etched on a floating marker, read, "Where the gull's cry split the night, seek the light that burns too bright." Clara, her historian's mind sharp, pointed to a distant buoy where a light flickered erratically. "That's it," she called, her voice nearly lost in the wind.
Freddie's yacht reached the buoy first, his hand plunging into the water to retrieve a brass cylinder. "Got it!" he shouted. But as he tugged, a rope securing the sail's bow snapped with a crack like gunfire. The heavy beams swung wildly, and Freddie, caught off guard, was flung overboard into the frothing sea. Vivian screamed, her voice piercing the night. "Freddie!" She scrambled to throw a line, but the current was merciless, dragging him toward a jagged outcrop. Poirot, his mind razor-sharp, barked, "Madame, the tiller!" Mrs. Lestrange seized the helm as he hurled a coiled rope with unerring aim. Freddie grabbed it, his face pale as bone, and Poirot, with strength belying his small frame, hauled him aboard. Gasping, Freddie collapsed on the deck, water streaming from his clothes. Someone whispered," he choked. "In the wind. You'll pay." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A whisper, monsieur, or a threat?" Nick's yacht pulled alongside, Clara clutching the map like a talisman. "Is he all right?" she called, her voice trembling. "He lives," Poirot replied, his gaze sweeping the cove. The snapped rope, he noted, bore the same clean cut as the lantern's cord from the cliff. His fingers brushed the cylinder Freddie had retrieved, its surface etched with a new riddle. The tide keeps faith with those who dare, but betrays the heart that unaware. Back on shore, Magdala rushed to Freddie, wrapping him in a blanket. "My God, what happened? The ropes were new." "New," Poirot said softly, "yet severed with precision. This is no act of the sea." Vivian, shivering despite the blanket, snapped, "This game's cursed, Magdala. First me, now Freddie. Who's next?" Nick, his face taut, muttered, "It's just bad luck. Stop making a drama of it." Mrs. Lestrange's veil fluttered. "Luck does not wield a knife, Mr. Buckley." Dr. Graham, waiting on the pier, examined Freddie's sodden form. "Shock and bruises, but he'll recover. The sea's not kind to the reckless." Clara, her notebook sodden, whispered, "The smuggler's hoard, it's said to be cursed by the tides. Every Buckley who sought it drowned." Poirot, his mustache quivering, held up the brass cylinder. "This, mademoiselle, contains the key to your next challenge. But I wonder, does it also unlock the truth of this house?" In the grand hall, warmed by a roaring fire, Magdala opened the cylinder, revealing a silver key engraved with a wave. "This unlocks tomorrow's trial," she said, her voice unsteady. "But I swear I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." Freddie, sipping brandy, fixed her with a hard stare. "Someone did. That rope didn't cut itself." Poirot, standing by a window, turned the riddle over in his mind. The clean cut, the whispered threat, the pattern of sabotage, it pointed to a mind both cunning and desperate. He recalled the silk scrap from the conservatory, its jasmine scent faint but unmistakable. His eyes drifted to Mrs. Lestrange, whose gloved hand rested on her reticule, the silver chain glinting beneath her cuff. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, drawn by a faint rustle from the hall. Slipping into the shadows, he glimpsed a figure, slight, hurried, vanishing toward the servants' stairs. He did not pursue, but his fingers closed around the sheared rope he'd pocketed, its fibers matching those from the cliff. Another piece of the puzzle. In his room, Poirot sat at a small desk, the storm's howl a counterpoint to his thoughts. He laid out his clues: the glass shard with an N, the jasmine-scented silk, the sheared bolt, the scorched parchment, and now the cut rope. Each was a breadcrumb leading to a truth buried in Endhouse's shadows. Was Freddie the target, or a pawn in a larger game? And the whisper,
Whose voice rode the wind? A knock interrupted his reverie. Magdala stood at the door, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I found this, slipped under my door." She handed him a folded note, its ink smudged but legible. "The hoard is mine. Stop the game, or the tide takes another." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A threat, mademoiselle, and a confession. Someone fears your game will expose them." "But who?" she whispered, her hands twisting. "I thought this was just fun." "Fun," Poirot said, his voice soft as steel, "is the mask of motive. Fear not, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot does not sleep while treachery sails." As she left, Poirot returned to his desk, the note joining his collection of clues. The storm raged outside, the cove's tides churning like the secrets of Endhouse. The survival game was a battleground, and he knew the next move would be critical. With the moon obscured and the sea roaring, Poirot's little gray cells burned like the beacon, determined to navigate the tides of treachery before they claimed another soul.
Chapter 5. Mirrors of Deceit. The storm that had battered Endhouse through the night retreated by dusk, leaving a sky streaked with violet and a sea that hissed like a coiled serpent. Hercule Poirot stood in the manor's shadowed hall, his polished shoes silent on the worn parquet, his green eyes glinting with the intensity of a predator on the scent. The survival game, Magdala Buckley's elaborate charade, had spiraled into a deadly dance. A cut rope on the cliff, a venomous spider in the conservatory, a sabotaged beam in the attic, and a severed sail line in the cove. Each incident, meticulously catalogued in Poirot's mind, alongside a glass shard etched with an N, a jasmine-scented silk scrap, a sheared bolt, a scorched parchment, and a threatening note, pointed to a mastermind weaving treachery into the game's fabric. "The truth," he murmured, his Belgian accent sharp as a rapier. "It hides in the reflections of this house. But tonight I shall hold the mirror to its face." The guests gathered in the grand ballroom, its mirrored walls reflecting 1,000 flickering candles. The air was thick with scent of wax and anticipation, the storm's aftermath lending a feverish edge to the evening. Magdala, resplendent in a sapphire gown, her auburn hair crowned with a silver diadem, stood before a velvet-draped table. "Welcome to the survival game's grandest trial, a masquerade ball, where masks conceal and mirrors reveal. Your task is to find a map hidden in this room, a map to Endhouse's hidden vault. But beware, not all reflections show the truth." Vivian Clare, her bandaged hand hidden beneath a lace glove, adjusted her peacock-feathered mask. "A ball? After nearly drowning Freddie? Your games are losing their charm, Magdala." Freddie Langdon, recovered but wary, twirled a harlequin mask with a forced grin. "Let's dance and be done with it. I'm ready to win this vault and sail away from this madhouse." Dr. Elias Graham, his spectacles glinting beneath a plain black mask, clutched a cane. "I'll watch from the sidelines. My dancing days are long gone." Mrs. Lestrange, draped in ebony silk and a veiled mask that deepened her mystery, murmured, "Masks are dangerous. They let the heart speak what the face conceals." Clara Trelawney, her historian's eyes wide behind a moon-shaped mask, clutched her notebook. "The Buckleys held balls here during the smuggling days. Deals made in whispers, betrayals sealed with a waltz." Nick Buckley, his artist's hands restless beneath a wolf mask, snorted. "It's just a party, Clara. Stop digging up ghosts." Poirot, disguised as a jester in crimson and gold mask, his mustache peeking beneath, moved through the crowd like a shadow. His mind was a ledger of clues, the note threatening to end the game, the jasmine scent linking Mrs. Lestrange to the conservatory, Nick's furtive movements. Tonight, he sensed the game would reach a crescendo. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and a ballroom swirled with color, silks rustling, masks glinting, reflections fracturing in the mirrors.
Magdala handed each guest a silver card with a riddle. In the glass where shadows meet, find the path beneath your feet. Poirot, gliding past a couple in a gavotte, noted Freddy's bold steps toward a gilded mirror where he traced a carved rose. "Clever girl," he muttered, pressing the carving. A click echoed, and a panel slid open, revealing a parchment with a star-shaped seal. "First clue," he called, waving it. The parchment bore a cipher. 3 turns left where the chandelier weeps. Vivian, her peacock mask flashing, darted to the chandelier, its crystals dripping like tears. She plucked a glass bead etched with a number, 12. "This must mean something," she said, her voice sharp with triumph. Clara, hovering near a tarnished mirror, whispered, "The Buckleys hid their gold in secret rooms. The mirrors were signals, smuggler's code." Her fingers brushed a frame, revealing a hidden catch that released a brass key. Nick, his wolf mask askew, sketched the ballroom's layout, his pencil scratching with feverish intensity. "This is madness," he muttered, but his eyes darted to Mrs. Lestrange, who stood motionless, her veiled mask a void in the candlelight. Poirot, waltzing with a giggling debutante, overheard Dr. Graham murmuring to Magdala, "This house, it's alive with old sins." The doctor's cane tapped nervously, its tip gleaming with fresh polish. The second clue emerged from a mirror's base, a silver compass pointing to a corner where shadows pooled. Freddy, ever bold, knelt to pry up a floorboard, revealing a velvet pouch containing a sapphire ring. "Another piece," he crowed. But his triumph was cut short by a gasp from Vivian. She stood before a central mirror, her reflection distorted, her face paling. She clutched her throat, her champagne flute fell, shattering, as foam bubbled at her lips. She collapsed, her peacock mask slipping to reveal eyes wide with terror. Chaos erupted. Freddy dropped the ring, rushing to her side. Dr. Graham, with surprising speed, knelt, his medical bag open. "Poison. Cyanide by the smell. I have no antidote for this." He began compressions, but Vivian's breathing was shallow, her pulse fading. Poirot, his gestures mask a stark contrast to his grim expression, seized the shattered flute. A faint residue clung to the glass. Bitter. Chemical. His eyes swept the room, landing on Mrs. Lestrange, whose gloved hand hovered near her reticule. With a swift motion, he intercepted her, his fingers closing on a small vial that slipped from her grasp. Its label was faded, but the scent was unmistakable. Cyanide. "Madame," he said, his voice low, "this is a dangerous accessory for a ball."
Her veiled mask turned, her voice a hiss. "You presume too much, Monsieur Poirot." Magdala, tears streaking her face, cried, "Vivian, is she—" "She lives," Dr. Graham said, his hands still working, "but we need to get her to a hospital, now." Freddy and Nick carried Vivian to a waiting car, the orchestra falling silent as guests scattered. Poirot, holding the vial, noted its weight, half empty, recently used. He turned to the mirror where Vivian had stood, its surface etched with a faint crack, forming a word, liar. His mustache twitched. "A message," he murmured, "but for whom?" The final clue, overlooked in the chaos, lay in the mirror's frame. A map, etched on vellum, showing a path to a vault beneath the rose arbor. Magdala, her hands shaking, clutched it. This was meant to be the prize, but now— "Now," Poirot said, "it is evidence. Someone seeks to end your game, mademoiselle, and perhaps more." As the guests fled to their rooms, Poirot lingered, his eyes catching a flicker in the shadows. Nick, his wolf mask discarded, slipped down a spiral staircase, his sketchbook clutched like a shield.
Poirot followed, silent as a cat, but the artist vanished into the maze of Endhouse's corridors. A faint creak echoed from below. The servants' passage, perhaps, or something darker. In the grand hall, Magdala confronted Poirot, her diadem askew. "Why is this happening? I just wanted to bring life to this house." Poirot's gaze was steady. "Life, mademoiselle, attracts those who deal in death. This map, where does it lead?" "To the vault. My great-uncle's hoard, gold, jewels, hidden since the smuggling days." Clara, lingering nearby, whispered, "The hoard's cursed. Every Buckley who sought it met ruin." Mrs. Lestrange, her veil now lifted to reveal sharp, haunted eyes, said, "Ruin is a choice, not a curse." Poirot pocketed the vial, its weight joining the glass shard, silk scrap, sheared bolt, scorched parchment, and cut rope in his collection. "Choices, madame, are what I seek to understand. And tonight one was made with poison." As the storm's last echoes faded, Poirot retired to his room, locking the door. He spread his clues on the desk, each a fragment of a mosaic. The cyanide vial pointed to Mrs. Lestrange, but her calm denial suggested a deeper game. Nick's flight down the stairs, the cracked mirror's accusation, "liar," hinted at a truth buried in Endhouse's reflections. Was Vivian the target or a distraction? And the map, did it lead to treasure or a trap? A distant scream pierced the night, sharp and fleeting, from the lower floors. Poirot's hand paused over the vial, his mind racing. The survival game was unraveling, its masks slipping to reveal faces of deceit. As the moon cast fractured light through his window, Hercule Poirot vowed to shatter the mirrors of Endhouse, exposing the heart of its treachery before the dawn.
Chapter 6. The Reckoning at Dawn. The first light of dawn crept over the Cornish cliffs, gilding the restless sea and casting long shadows across Endhouse's weathered stones. Hercule Poirot stood on the manor's wind-swept terrace, his Homburg hat tilted against the morning breeze, his green eyes sharp as polished agates. The survival game, Magdala Buckley's ill-fated spectacle, had spiraled into a deadly labyrinth. A cut rope on the cliff, a venomous spider in the conservatory, a sabotaged beam in the attic, a severed sail line in the cove, and a poisoned flute at the masquerade. His pocket held a grim collection. A glass shard etched with an N, a jasmine-scented silk scrap, a sheared bolt, a scorched parchment, a cut rope, a cyanide vial, and a vellum map to a hidden vault. Each was a thread in a tapestry of treachery, and today Poirot vowed the weaver would be unmasked. "The dawn," he murmured, his Belgian accent crisp as frost. "It brings clarity to the shadows, and Hercule Poirot, he does not falter." Inside, the grand hall was a hush of exhaustion and fear. The guests, battered by the game's relentless perils, gathered for what Magdala had promised was the final challenge. She stood by the fireplace, her auburn hair loose, her sapphire gown replaced by a simple linen dress, as if shedding the artifice of the past days. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but hollow. "The last trial. A ritual unearthing of the vault beneath the rose arbor. Find it, and you'll claim the smuggler's hoard. Then we're done." Vivian Clare, pale but resolute, her lace glove hiding the spider's bite, clutched a shawl. "Done, Magdala? You'll forgive me if I don't trust your promises." Freddie Langdon, bruises shadowing his yachtsman's tan, forced a laugh. "Let's dig up this treasure and be rid of this cursed place." Dr. Elias Graham, leaning on his cane, adjusted his spectacles. "I'll observe, if you don't mind. My bones aren't made for digging." Mrs. Lestrange, her veil discarded to reveal sharp, weary eyes, spoke softly. "The hoard is a siren's song. It lures, but it drowns."
Clara Trelawney, her historian's notebook tattered, whispered, "The Buckleys paid for their gold and blood. The story's worn of this moment." Nick Buckley, his artist's hand stained with charcoal, paced like a caged wolf. "Enough ghost stories. Let's finish this and go home." Poirot, his jester's mask long discarded, stood apart, his mind a chessboard where every move was calculated. The cyanide vial pointed to Mrs. Lestrange, but her calm defiance suggested a deeper role. Nick's furtive flight at the ball, the cracked mirror's accusation, liar, and the threatening note all circled a single truth: the game was a facade for a darker purpose. He had overheard no argument since the cliffside, but the scream from the lower floors last night echoed in his memory, a final warning of the stakes. Magdala led the group to the rose arbor, a tangled haven where thorns guarded blooms of crimson and white. The air was heavy with dew and a faint scent of decay, the sea's roar a distant pulse. She handed each guest a silver trowel, her emerald bracelet catching the dawn. "This is the map from the ball," she said, unfolding the vellum. "The vault's entrance is beneath the oldest rose. Dig carefully. The mechanism is delicate." "Delicate, mademoiselle, or dangerous?" Her eyes flickered. "Just old, like everything in this house." The group began to dig, earth yielding under their trowels. Freddie, ever bold, struck metal first, a rusted hatch, its edges etched with a ship's silhouette. "Here it is," he called, brushing dirt from a lock shaped like a wave. The silver key from the yacht race fit perfectly, and with a groan, the hatch opened, revealing a stone stair descending into darkness. Vivian hesitated, her voice sharp. "I'm not going down there, not after everything." Nick snorted, tossing his trowel aside. "Scared, Vivian? It's just a hole in the ground." Mrs. Lestrange's eyes narrowed. "A hole can be a grave, Mr. Buckley." Clara, clutching her notebook, whispered, "The smuggler's vault. Legends say it's guarded by traps. The Buckleys were paranoid." Dr. Graham, standing back, murmured, "Paranoia is often justified." Poirot, his lantern raised, descended first, his steps deliberate. The stair led to a damp chamber, its walls carved with nautical motifs, ships, stars, and a single word: redemption. A stone pedestal held a locked chest, its lid inlaid with mother of pearl. The locket from the attic, its ship engraving matching the carvings, was the key. Freddie, impatient, inserted it, and the chest clicked open, revealing a trove of gold coins, pearls, and a single emerald the size of a gull's egg. "Blimey," Freddie breathed, lifting the emerald. "This is it. The hoard."
But Poirot's hand shot out, seizing the locket before it could be discarded. "Not so fast, monsieur. This game, it ends now." His voice, soft but commanding, froze the group. He turned to Magdala, his eyes piercing. "Mademoiselle, your survival game was never a game, was it? It was a lure, a trap, to draw out a traitor." Magdala's face paled. "What are you saying?" Poirot paced the chamber, his lantern casting shadows like spectres. "Permit me to unravel the threads. The cut rope on the cliff aimed at me, an outsider, too curious. The spider in the conservatory meant for Vivian, whose sharp tongue threatened secrets. The beam in the attic targeting Dr. Graham, whose knowledge of poisons was inconvenient. The sail line in the cove meant to silence Freddie, who was too bold. And the poison at the ball, another strike at Vivian, but also a warning to all. Each act, deliberate, orchestrated by one among you." Nick laughed, a harsh bark. "You're mad, Poirot. This is Magdala's game gone wrong." "No," Poirot said, his mustache quivering. "It is your game, Monsieur Buckley. You, the artist, with your sketches of betrayal, your furtive steps, your absence during key moments. The glass shard with an N, your initial. The silk scrap scented with jasmine from your studio's paints. the sheared bolt cut with your sculptor's tools, the scorched parchment burned in your attic fireplace, the cut rope matching your yacht's rigging, and the cyanide procured through your connection to Dr. Graham's apothecary. Nick's face twisted, his hands clenching. Lies! You've got no proof. Poirot held up the cyanide vial. This, monsieur, was a misstep. Stolen from Dr. Graham, but dropped by your accomplice, Mrs. Lestrange, blackmailed by your knowledge of her past affair with a Buckley ancestor. You used her to plant the spider, to slip the poison, while you cut ropes and bolts. Mrs. Lestrange's eyes flashed. I had no choice. He threatened to expose me. Dr. Graham, his cane trembling, nodded. I suspected. My supplies were tampered with, but I said nothing, fearing for my life. Vivian, her voice venomous, hissed, You bastard, Nick! You poisoned me because I knew about your forged paintings, your debts. Clara gasped, her notebook falling. The hoard! You wanted it to pay off your creditors. Magdala, tears streaming, whispered, Nick, why? Poirot's voice was steel. The smuggler's hoard was your prize, monsieur, to escape your failures. The game was your stage to eliminate rivals. Vivian, who knew your secrets. Freddie, too popular. Dr. Graham, too observant. The scorched parchment was a feint to invoke the curse. The note, a desperate bid to stop the game when I grew close. Nick lunged for the chest, seizing the emerald, but Poirot's cane flicked out, tripping him. He fell, the gem rolling into the dirt. Enough, Poirot snapped. The constables are coming, summoned by my telegram last night. Your game is over. Freddie and Vivian restrained Nick, his struggles futile. Mrs. Lestrange sank to her knees, her face crumpling. Dr. Graham, his voice weary, said, I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry. Magdala, sobbing, clutched the locket. I just wanted to save this house, not destroy us. Clara, picking up her notebook, whispered, The curse is broken, the hoard's free. As the sun crested, constables arrived, their boots crunching on the gravel above. Nick was led away, his wolfish defiance shattered. Mrs. Lestrange followed, her head bowed, her complicity confessed. The vault's treasures were sealed for evidence, but Magdala, her spirit unbroken, vowed to restore Endhouse with honest means. Poirot, sipping a tisane on the terrace, watched the sea's eternal dance. The truth, he said to Magdala, it is like the tide. It gives, it takes, but it endures. She smiled faintly. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have saved us. He bowed, his hat tipping. No, mademoiselle. I have only swept the shadows from your mirrors. As the guests departed, Endhouse stood redeemed, its secrets laid bare. Poirot boarded the train to London, his holiday complete, the Cornish cliffs fading into the mist. The sea whispered its approval, and Hercule Poirot, his little grey cells at rest, smiled. The world was a fraction safer, and the truth, as always, had prevailed.